We are so honored to have you join us for this episode of Beyond the Loss. I'm Aditi Leverage, and I am a bereaved parent to two and parent to one living child. I'm a specialized pregnancy and infant loss coach, mindfulness meditation teacher, and founder of the registered charity, the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center.
And I'm Danyelle bereaved parent to my daughter Emelina and parent to two living daughters. Co-founder and director of operations of the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center. On this show, we share real stories about parenting and healing through pregnancy and infant loss. We allow space for the often silenced truths around loss to be heard. We offer an affirmative space for all people impacted by loss to share their stories, their triumphs, and their healing.
Please keep in mind that the stories shared are personal stories and are not to be used in replacement of professional advice. Should you need additional support, please visit our website in the show notes that are linked.
We are so excited to have you join us for today's episode. Let's start talking. Welcome back to Beyond the Loss. Today we are joined by Maggie McGee. Maggie reflects on how she came to grips with accepting the loss of the idea of how she envisioned her life to unfold, and that building a family comes in many ways and at different times for everyone. After navigating the journey through the fertility process as a single woman, Maggie is grateful to now be several years into motherhood. Her dreams of a family came full circle, now a married woman with 3 kids. Thank you for being here today, Maggie.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's super exciting, Maggie, for you and I to connect after 6 years of our initial meeting, and I'll let you kind of share about that. But do you mind just sharing with our viewer or our listeners who are listening today a little bit about your journey and what led you to the podcast today?
Yes, happy to do so. Thank you. So I began noticing in my 30s that all of my friends were starting to find their partners and build families. And I was really enjoying working and living and having fun, and wasn't necessarily noticing that the clock was ticking until it slowly started getting a little bit louder and louder. I had some great adventures and lots of travel, but every now and then was reminded that, okay, I'm not doing what I thought I was going to be doing, which was building a family. And so I had some great accomplishments that I was quite proud of from education and profession, but that building a family just never really seemed attainable to me. It was like grabbing a cloud that you can see it and that slips between your fingers when you reach for it. So I would get in relationships and then they wouldn't work out. So it just slips through my fingers again. So as the clock started to sort of ticking a little bit louder and louder, I really started paying attention. And I think it was probably my late 30s, early 40s. I was urged by a friend to consider this. This being, look at building a family on my own terms. She was going through the very same thing, so that was helpful to have somebody that was also walking that journey and was able to be a support and an advocate. So that's what really started me on this journey to create the family and the life that I had envisioned for myself. Because by that time, I was noticing that every now and then I would get distracted by these wonderful events in my life. As I mentioned, I had some nice professional opportunities, but then every now and then I'd watch a movie and I would see them building a family and I would just crumble into a puddle and realize I've been pushing it down below the surface. It's still there. It is still something that I want because it's so easy to get distracted by the day-to-day. But then I was reminded regularly that this is important to me. I need to pay attention to it. In those early days, I did consider and explored adoption and looked into that. However, I will share that I was discouraged by the feedback and the experience of that as a single woman. I highly recommend it for families who are able to pursue that option. There's a lot of kids that need a really good home, but as a single woman, it was a bit discouraging because what I was hearing was sort of surface level yes, but unconscious no, in that I was unlikely to be selected because I was a single woman. And that was some of the early disappointments in trying to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish. And so that sort of put me on the sidelines for a little bit. And then this exciting curveball came my way. I had an opportunity to go on an international work assignment. So then that put this whole building a family sort of on the back burner yet again for another more than, I was out of country for 6 months. So it was a little bit before then, a little bit after then. So again, that was me wondering, was this life, was this the universe telling me that this just wasn't the right time, or that it wasn't meant to be? So just more questioning as to why me? Why isn't this happening? It's slipping through my fingers like a cloud. So just sort of to kind of round out that experience. So once I returned from that fun adventure of being in Europe for several months, again at the urging of that very same friend, I refocused my attention on this journey and reminded myself how important this was, and I began making the appointments at the fertility clinic.
Wow. So interesting how the universe kind of nudged the process a little bit for you there.
It's interesting in reflecting back which I have done in preparing to speak with you today, the roles that people play in your life as they pop up and remind you as messengers of, hey, this was really important to you. Don't get distracted. Hey, and without that, would I be where I am today? So important to pay attention to the messengers.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, the messengers in hindsight. Yeah, when you take a step back and look, there's always these messengers that show up for us and again, like nudge us along. I love that. I love that. Are you still in contact with that friend? Just out of
I am,
curiosity?
yes, and I'm really pleased to share that she's also been successful in her journey as well. So we've both come through the other side of it. So yes, still in connection with her.
Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the fertility process?
Yes. So I knew it was going to be a big undertaking, mentally, physically. I knew it was this huge concept. Just didn't really know past that what that really meant. So prior to undergoing that, I took myself on a bit of a getaway to get myself mentally, spiritually, and physically ready for what I was about to undertake. I needed to consciously focus on erasing those old messages that I was carrying, that there was a reason I hadn't built a family. There was a reason why I didn't have somebody in my life that, a traditional means. There was, maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother. I had to erase and unpack all of that and get rid of it and really open my mind and my heart as to what lay ahead and what the possibilities would be. Not could be, but would be. So it was conscious, it was intentional, and it was really important for me to do. So I was able to go to this lovely place in Arizona where I was able to meet with some nurses, some medical nurses, and talk about the medical side of choosing to do this in my 40s. Yes, I said that, in my 40s, as well as just really do some spiritual work and, look at everything, physical, dietary, all of that. And that was really great. So the actual process itself, as I mentioned, it's a big concept, the whole fertility process. There's lots to consider, and it quickly becomes all about appointments and blood work and the scientific details. It becomes a process really quickly, and you almost lose sight of the end goal because you're in a process. And it's important to not lose sight of that end goal and not lose sight of the staff at the fertility clinic. They do an amazing job. It is also their job. So being the snowflake that I am, I had to just adjust my story was probably one of many that they heard that day. So they were there to help me through. But I mentioned that because I did coach a couple of women at the end of the process who were struggling with that a little bit. But you have to remember that that's what they do. it is for them, the appointments. They want you to succeed, of course. But so that was really interesting, that fertility clinic process. And what really struck me about going to the fertility clinic was the number of couples in the waiting room. It was a busy place. And all of these couples were going through something that they probably didn't expect, that was unplanned, and was terribly important to them and deeply emotional. And that's what struck me every time I went there, was seeing these couples and wondering, what are they going through? Why are they here? What do they think of me sitting here by myself? It's an odd, surreal, lonely space in general. And I found that there's not a lot of people talking about it. Sometimes I would see it maybe highlighted in movies, but I found that sometimes it makes people a little bit uncomfortable to discuss it. Things are not turning out the way that they expected. Why is it so easy for so-and-so at the office or down the street? Why am I here in the fertility clinic going through these appointments and these pieces of data, these measurement, like why? So I find it's a bit of a lonely space. So I'm so glad for the work that you guys are doing. So just further along the fertility process, through all those appointments, came to this really exciting spot where it comes to selecting the donor. Is that okay if I talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, I think that is a conversation that I don't think a lot of people talk about. So yeah, I would love to hear that.
So that's a critical part in the process. At a certain and correct point in the process, you're faced with that. You're faced with tons of information. It's a surreal process, and you're presented with information about a person's background, education, medical information, and again, as an individual, it's a lot. It's surreal. I again had incredible support from one of my friends who was home on maternity leave herself, and she was able to help me go through that information and select. It is a selection process, and you really take stock and inventory of your own values when you are looking at that information. Sometimes you have more information about the donor than you do maybe if you're your partner, or however else other people get pregnant. They may have less information than I had. It's life-changing. But I do want to share that when I saw the photo, because you do get to see photos up to a certain age, up to a certain early age, and then that's it. But it kind of gives you a visual idea. I knew in my heart that he was the one. So that was such a shift, and that was just such an inspiration. Like, okay, this is meant to be. This is the right journey for me. So that was exciting. I'll just keep going, if that's okay, on to the sort of the next phase of the
Yeah,
fertility
I
process.
just loved that you shared that, because I think that the thing that stood out for me with that is how you had so much more information than people who are maybe building their families in the more quote unquote traditional way. There's people that get pregnant with partners who they really have none of that none of that information or history about. So I think I just like that you shared that, because I think that a lot of people have this idea of like, oh my goodness, how can you choose to have a child with somebody you've never met? And indeed, just because you've met them in the physical form in a traditional way doesn't mean that you actually know that person at all, right? So I really liked that you shared that, because that was really a big shift even in my own perspective of the process. So thank you for that.
It made it real,
Mm-hmm.
because now
Yeah.
I have tangible bits of information and components of information. This individual and their direct, not descendants, what would you call it? The generation before, mother, father, are they still alive? Illnesses,
Right.
education of donor, hobbies, traits, preferences for extracurricular activities. You have all of this information, which is why, again, it's super important as a single woman that I needed support through that. I needed to sort of walk through that and have somebody validate that. Am I on the right track here? Does this make sense? But then again, like I said, as soon as I saw the photo, I just knew.
Yeah, and I like that too, is that you just knew, and then you also mentioned with the process of the fertility clinic is very much a process, and it's very much their job. And so I like that you armed yourself in moving into or staying connected to like that heart space, right? Because when we're building a family, whether it's through assisted fertility, single parent, traditional, I think it's really easy for us to lose sight of the reason why we're building that family when we're experiencing fertility challenges. So it's super important to stay connected into the love and the why, right? Because it can become very medical. It can become very much a process, and when we are in that process, it can feel heavy if we're not staying rooted and grounded in the why. So I really liked that you shared that. Yeah, so
Mhm.
you can continue. I just wanted to say to say
No,
that.
you're absolutely right that it takes a village really, and it took a whole group of my girlfriends to help walk me through that process. And I had mentioned two women were referred to me sort of later in this process that were exploring it themselves, and I was happy to meet with them and talk and share my experience. But that came up in both, that they were quite emotional about and I don't want to cast a negative light on the fertility clinic. It's their job. If you need support and love, that's where you lean on your family and your friends. That's where it comes from. The fertility clinic, they were all very caring and lovely, but yeah, it's important that your focus is cast in the right direction on who's there to support you, and which is your family and your friends.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, that's why the work we do at the center, I think, is so imperative, because we are not medically focused. We're not a medical clinic. What we do is we support from the community and the heart-centered side. And I think you're absolutely spot on, right? There needs to be a balance of both. Both pieces are imperative when you're building your family, however you're choosing to build that family.
So that same theme carries on into the actual conception day, which was amazing. It was a Saturday morning, and I met my two girlfriends at the coffee shop beforehand to have coffee and muffins before we went to the clinic. And then my aunt joined us at the clinic. Like, it was just amazing to have a support group there. And I have it documented as having our coffee and muffins um, before going to the clinic for conception day. So I have amazing memories. So one of the girlfriends that met me there that morning, she was able to suit up and support me in that moment. I have actual video of the conception because they were able to show me on the screen what was happening, and she was able to take a video of that while just being there to support me. It's amazing, and it's a bit mind-blowing to see that actual moment. That just the beauties of technology today, it's a bit staggering. So, and then I think we went to lunch after. So that was an amazing and very special day. So I would not have been able to do any of that had it not been for the support of my girlfriends in my life at that time. And then from there, Aditi, over to you, because had it not been for you, how I found you, met with you to be my doula through this process, like, I didn't know how I was going to do that. Like, going to birthing classes as a single woman, I mean, how would that even work? So I thought, okay, I need to find a different way. And luckily, that's when our paths collided and connected, in that I found you in your work as a doula to help me walk through that. And that was very pragmatic, as I am, in terms of, I remember the cards. You had the cards to sort of walk through all the steps. What if this? What if that? And what about this? And map it all out and pick your cards. And then that was my plan. Great. Didn't even think of half of those things. That was incredibly helpful.
Oh, yeah, it's so cool to like connect 6 years later after and just see how the process was for you. Yeah, you were one of my doula clients that I've always just kept in my heart because that's what stood out to me with you is that you always came across as very certain of what you wanted and what that looked like for you, and you were very clear of what that was. And as before we started recording, you kind of mentioned that that clarity wasn't always there, but going away and going to that retreat helped you gain that clarity.
Absolutely. I was clear as a bell after that and just moved forward step by step every day, taking another small step. And then before I knew it, I was meeting with you and we were planning the delivery and made arrangements to have my mother there. And then some of my girlfriends were coming by the hospital. And before I knew it, you know, Charlie was here. And as I mentioned, early on, like in my 30s and early 40s, it was a weird and lonely space and odd. But in looking back, I now know that all along I was meant to be Charlie's mummy, and it turned out how it was supposed to turn out. So I think that's what I want to convey as well is to keep the end goal in mind and just to have faith that things will happen when they're meant to happen and how they're meant to happen. And since Charlie arrived, I mean, it shifted everything in my life, my intentions, my focus, my relationships. Shortly after Charlie arrived, I reconnected with someone I knew from my past, and now I'm married and I have two teenagers as well. So my life is completely changed and it's completely family focused, which is where I wanted it to be.
Amazing. But yeah, I've been curious as to where your journey kind of took you after, because I was there for Charlie's arrival, and then we haven't actually, I mean, we've connected here and there over the years, but not on a personal level. So you are then, is it fair to say that you're a step parent then?
I am a step parent, yes. So yeah,
Okay.
3 boys in the house.
Yeah, yes, busy house.
I went from 0 to 3 in a very short period of time, but I would
Yeah.
have it no other way.
Yes, yes. Can you tell us, because obviously now we're recording this in 2021 and we are all located in Calgary, Alberta, where we are currently in a lockdown, a third lockdown due to COVID-19. And so can you share a little bit, I don't know if I want to call it advice, but maybe perspective, insight into folks who are navigating, especially single people who are navigating fertility journeys during COVID-19?
hmm So this pandemic really highlights the concept of life not turning out how we expected it to, dealing with that and the grief and loss over this is not turning out how we expected it. That's more of a reality for everyone, I would say. And we're all grappling with that. I've heard several references from some of the folks I work with that their daughters are really quite anxious about not being able to get out. They're in the prime of their life and they're in lockdown. And so they can't get out there and meet people and find that life partner and choose a path to build a family. They perhaps feel delayed. So I acknowledge that and recognize that. My advice is from a fertility perspective, don't wait. From a science and fertility perspective, there are certainly many options for women to freeze their eggs. One harsh reality that I receive from the doctors is that I mean the decline and the decrease of your egg production, it takes just a cliff dive after age 40. So my advice is don't wait. And I don't know what to say about the pandemic and getting out there and meeting people. I don't know how that's working these days. I'm sure people have found ways through, online dating, Zoom dating, or however we're doing it these days. But from building a family perspective, I think there are options out there. So I would encourage young women to explore them, to see what the options are, to get information, to get informed, to make their own decisions, but to not wait to do that. They don't have to act on it, but just to get the information.
Mhm. Yeah, I think having choice is really, I mean, that's what we do really well at the center, right? I think that for any journey, and any healing, I think being able to arm yourself with choices and know the choices, know that there are choices, I think that that's one of the most empowering things and beautiful gifts that we can offer ourselves along this journey of parenthood. I have
Agreed.
a question for you.
Okay.
Just something that, as you've been speaking about, we have a lot of clients that access our center who have either experienced fertility challenges or have had loss, and now they are older, quote unquote older. And so a lot of these statistics, right? Like you said, I heard that like the cliff dive of your eggs kind of goes after 40, or like even the percentages when you're doing IVF, after a certain age, and what the success rates are. How did you navigate not letting those statistics, because those statistics in the process of fertility are mentioned, from my understanding, I've never personally gone through assisted fertility, but from supporting clients who have, they get mentioned a lot through the process. And so I see a lot of clients putting a lot of like emotional investment into those statistics. Can you share how you navigate the journey by understanding that those are statistics, but also understanding that your journey is not a statistics, if that makes sense?
That's a big topic. It's a big question
Mm-hmm.
because having experienced it, you do get focused on statistics. Statistics are there for a reason, and they come from multiple cases of that have been measured. So you do need to pay attention to them. I think what you also have to balance out is, in reflecting, there was a bit of balancing between science and faith, and what steps was I willing to take through science at the expense of my faith to achieve my end goal. Some family members reached out as well because of this creating a family through science rather than through faith. Certainly some concerns there. And then the statistics, being an older woman, absolutely there are some statistics to pay attention to in terms of your egg production, your age in carrying a child, your age in delivering a child. There are different risks the older you get. I think it all circles back to don't wait, get the information, be informed so you can make choices early on. I think that I was incredibly lucky, but I also took perhaps a little bit of a different approach being a woman over 40 in terms of my approach to fertility. So I'm not sure if I've completely answered your question, but I guess in summary, you can't ignore the statistics. You just have to keep moving forward and try. But trying does come with cost. It comes with heartbreak. So you have to be prepared for that. That speaks back to the just being mentally and physically, I should have said financially and spiritually prepared for the journey,
Mm-hmm.
because nothing's guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you said a balance, right? Because I do feel like it's a balance. Some people can go really down that a person over 40, and now there's all these statistics that are kind of weighing against me, and that can really get people down. So it is a balance of like leaning into those statistics and also doing other things to help you find that balance. And you're right, right? It's a financially costly
Yes.
process, which is again why at the center, why we are a charity, because we understand that the process of fertility and getting pregnant, through assisted fertility, is it costs money, but then to find that balance in the spiritual, mental, emotional well-being, I feel like if we can offer that, for free to people, then this is how they can maybe balance that science and that faith piece that you were talking about. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I'll just add a little touch to that. It was one of my aunts, very traditional, different generation, that reached out to my mother to understand my choice and what was I doing? What was I doing? I'm a single woman and I'm using science. And so my mom shared that with me, and the relationship with that aunt is fine because I understand she was also coming from just a place of trying to understand, because she grew up in her faith very differently, different time. And I understand that and I respect that. But I also knew what I needed to do and wanted to do. And I had to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable to share? Because I know a lot of our listeners, whether they're single people who are navigating fertility or they are using science and assisted fertility with partners, but there is pushback. I think whether you are a single person or in a partnership who are trying to get pregnant, I do feel like there are those people out there that just don't understand the assisted fertility journey. And do you mind sharing anything that helped you kind of when there was that pushback from people?
I might refer back to a statement I made earlier about my appointments to the fertility clinic and how busy that waiting room was. That I was not alone, even though I was alone without a partner in that waiting room, and that was a different journey. But that waiting room was filled with couples, and mentioned it's a lonely space because it's not a well discussed or commonly discussed topic. And mentioned I'd seen it here and there in a movie, here and there where maybe it's a subplot, but there are so many people going through this. That to me was a bit of a reassurance as well, that this science is here for all of us to help, where there is something that's just not there to help us create the family that we wanted to create, regardless of what that is, on whether it's same-sex couples, or there's something with the woman's eggs or the man's sperm, or you're single, or you're a single mother by choice, which is how I did enter this whole process. I didn't expect to be reconnected with somebody I knew from before and suddenly have a full family. I was pursuing this as a single mother by choice, which is a whole demographic. It's a whole community in of themselves. And that is how I intended to carry on. But I think to the balance of the science and the faith, I just had to have faith in what I saw, was that there was tons of families pursuing science as well to get through this stage, this moment in their lives. And I think that was a bit of reassurance for me.
Yeah. Can I ask you another question that
Of
just out of what you
course.
said? Just because I'm envisioning you as a single mother by choice going to the fertility clinic and being surrounded by couples. Was that triggering at all for you?
Oh my gosh, of course.
And how did you navigate that trigger?
I have no idea in hindsight. I don't know. I
Yeah.
just, again, it's being really clear on my intent, that I had always wanted to do this since my 20s. I knew I was meant to have kids, or, some women know clearly, nope, not for me. I always, like, it was a concept. So I always knew, but absolutely it was a trigger. And that's really tough on your psyche, on your confidence, on what is wrong with me? Why am I here? Like, how did I get here? And why is there no one in the chair beside me? Like, what the heck? So you bet it was a trigger, but you got to just keep moving forward one step at a time, one day at a time. And that support of friends and my aunt who's here in town, we're all incredibly important in that journey as well. Huge trigger.
So it sounds like to me that you really created a community around you. So although you were doing this as a single woman, you created a community around you to provide that support because you weren't pursuing it in a relationship. Is that about right?
It's exactly right, Danielle. But I also, to keep it in perspective, there certainly you need that emotional support, that net. But at the end of the day, I still needed to wrap my head around that I would be a single mother and I'm going to be there in the morning, in the day, and at night, and I need to provide for this child, and I'm the one that needs to take care of this child. So I needed to go in eyes wide open, clear head that sure, they might come over on a weekend or send me a friendly, supportive text and help out in a pinch, without a doubt. But at the end of the day, I had to be eyes wide open that this is on me. I'm going to do this. And I will share with you and any of your listeners that the fertility clinic wants success and you want success. So 2 eggs are put in, and with the hopes that they want things to work. So not only was I choosing to be a single mother by choice, have a child, there was a huge possibility that I would have twins. I would have 2. So that was rather terrifying. And I did lose the 1 egg a couple of weeks after conception day. So that happened. But yeah, I had to be really clear and ready for the full responsibility that I was taking on.
Yeah, lots of, and so listeners who are listening, right? Our podcast is called Beyond the Loss, and so you did lose the 1 egg. However, there's a whole history from your story of grief and loss, right? It might not be quote unquote the traditional pregnancy infant loss that we other guests have expressed on the podcast. However, I hear a lot of grief and loss about, like you mentioned with COVID-19, of just what life, how we envision our life, how we envision our families. And we hear that a lot from our community at the center of, this isn't what I expected. This isn't what I envisioned. So was there anything, or is there anything that you can share with others who are navigating the grief and the loss of what we envision our life to be? Is there any tips that you might have for our listeners on how to navigate that space?
I think today it's really reassuring that the conversation about mental wellness, mental fitness, mental well-being is so much more in our everyday conversation now. So support resource centers like yours, and seeking out positive habits and all of that. I think that's incredibly important, I would say. So I think that's my tip in terms of dealing with grief and loss and balancing what you thought was going to be versus what is in front of you today. I feel like as a world, we're talking about that a lot more, and that's a positive, that's a great thing. Certainly wasn't necessarily the case when I went through it, and that's fine. I'm just so pleased to be able to see it now that it's part of our everyday language to talk about support resources, mental wellness, mental fitness, and what are we doing to keep ourselves mentally well and dealing with the shifts in our lives that we weren't expecting. So
Yeah, I think that's been a really, if there is a positive to COVID-19, I think it's really highlighted the importance of our mental health and our wellness, and how we can support ourselves whenever we're navigating grief and loss, which is what COVID-19 is, right? We're all navigating that space of things should be different than they are.
one final comment on that is that all of this was such a critical and important moment in my life. But once Charlie was born, and then probably within a year after, it really became not the story anymore. The story is my lovely son and the light he brings into my life every day, even when he's being homeschooled with me while I'm trying to work. um, so how I got there is less of the story. It's lovely to revisit this and talk to you guys about it. And if anyone finds the tiniest morsel of support or helpful information, or if I could be a resource to anyone, I certainly put that out there into the universe. But that's the past now. It's not what I'm carrying every day anymore. That what I'm carrying now is this beautiful family and this lovely child that just makes my heart sing. So that's my focus now. But it was an important journey and a big one at the time. But soon it becomes sort of like, okay, got through that. Let's focus on raising this child now and building the family that I want.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Danyelle, do you have any final thoughts or questions for Maggie?
Thank you, Maggie, for sharing your story. I think what I took from what you were saying is you did a lot of self reflection prior to even getting started in your journey. And it seems like that self reflection that you did at the beginning is something that you kind of carried on through your whole journey. Would that sound about right? And if we talk about that self reflection, is there a tip or two that you could give to our listeners who may be in the same situation or be considering your journey?
I think I referenced earlier, and I think it's also a term from Mr. Rogers, is like find the helpers in the community, seek them out to help you reflect and help you focus on what you want, is seeking out those individuals who are aligned with what you're trying to do. And I think I've been very blessed to have great people in my life that I can have as helpers, but there were others, as I mentioned, that maybe it's uncomfortable of a conversation to have, or maybe they just didn't understand. So always seek out the helpers. But yeah, the spiritual part of it along the way, and just having that faith before the journey. Like I said, when I saw his photo, meeting Aditi, all just pieces along the way when they were all lining up, the intention at the time, and then in looking back, realizing, gosh, all that really did line up nicely.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Maggie, for being here and for sharing more about your journey and this important piece of being a single mother by choice and what that process looks like and navigating it. Because we do know that there's a lot of folks out there who are navigating parenthood on their own, and I think that it deserves to be talked about. So thank you for showing up so honestly and authentically in your truth and in your journey. We have a question that we ask all of our guests at the end, and that is, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something that you now know, what would you tell yourself?
I would say, don't worry. It's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. Just give it time. What
Give
will
it
be, will
time.
be.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much. And for anybody listening to this podcast today, the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center runs Next Steps After Loss peer support group that addresses if you're trying to conceive, if you're actively trying to conceive, whether through natural fertility, assisted fertility, whether you have a partner, whether you are a single person by choice, whether you've actually had, again, quote unquote, pregnancy or infant loss, or if you are navigating the grief and loss experience of fertility, you are welcome to be a part of that group. We've got a group that runs in Mountain Standard Time as well as Eastern Standard Time. They run remotely, so you can actually join those groups from anywhere in the world, and they are free because we do know that fertility can be expensive if you are going the assisted fertility route. So we like to keep our services accessible, and we welcome you to join this community. So thank you, Maggie, for coming on, and we will see you next time on Beyond the Loss.
Thank you for having me.